ORM stands for?
Object-oriented something.
That would be OOP, right? Object-oriented programming. Yeah, so object, though, is right. So how about the R and the M? Relational, yeah, and then mapper, right? So what this is going to mean is that we're able to do things with our database using this framework, Django, that it's built so that we don't have to actually write raw SQL queries. All right. You guys did do a little bit of MySQL, I know, during Web Fundamentals, and we'll briefly review it today as well. But when we interact with Django, we don't have to write those raw queries, which is kind of nice. So that's the big thing that Django gives us that actually Flask did not have. So you guys still may be wondering, why are we even doing Django? We had Flask and that was just fine, right? So this is the one of the main things that it gives us is this ORM. Now the first thing that we're going to do to introduce the ORM is just create a new project. And again, I'm going to kind of go through the steps just so we get used to it again. So I'm going to go to my Coding Dojo folder here, clear that out. I always need to activate my environment, right, before I create a new Django project. So let me go to where I want to create this project. I want to go to Stacks, Python. I don't know why I always type it. I always type in Python.
I've seen it in your old videos too.
I don't know why that is. Very weird.
Old habits die hard.
Yeah, they die hard. They die hard. Alright, so I'm going to say source, and then I'm going to go up one level into my environments, and then I've got my Django environment, bin/activate. Okay, very good. So we're just going to create a new project. You guys remember the command on that one? What is it? Oh, I hear a lot of different answers here. Django admin, right? Admin, start project, and we'll call this ORM intro. Intro. Okay, cool. So it should have created that for me. Then I'm just going to say code ORM intro to open it up. Nice. Cool. Let's open up my terminal here, because I always like working in the integrated terminal. Now keep in mind that you guys don't have to do this. You can obviously keep things going in your other terminal if that's how you prefer to do it. I just like using the one here so I have everything in the same place. Alright, so I need to activate my environment again because of course it's not active in this current window here. So let's go source. I'm going to go up 2 levels now because I'm now inside of my project. Environments, Django, bin, activate. Okay, great. What's the next thing that we always create once we've created our project, our overall project? We're going to create the actual app, right? So let's say Python manage.py and then start app, and I'll just call mine main. There it is. Cool. So in order to link our main project to actually make it accessible, or I'm sorry, our main app, we need to add it to our settings.py file, right? So let's go into the ORM folder, find our settings.py, come down here to our installed apps, and I'll just add this one that I created, main. Okay, so we created our app, that's cool. We're not actually going to have a web app in the sense that we're going to be interacting with it through the browser right now, because right now we're only focusing on data. Today and the next day, we're really just going to be focusing on how do we work with the database with Django. All right. So I could theoretically just run this project right now, but what I want to do is create my models for the project. This is where we're going to interact with the database. So if I open up this main folder here, see there's this models.py file. So I think I mentioned maybe on the first day when we were introing Django that this is a file that we're going to be working with later, just not yet. So let's open it up. Okay, and I'll close out my settings here. So notice here that we're actually importing models. by default, when that file gets created, it's importing models from Django.db. Okay, great. Now, when I'm going to create a model for my project, so let's say I know that my project needs to have users in it, I'm going to need to create a class. Do you guys remember how we create classes? What that looks like syntactically? Class. Okay, and then the name of the class. So yeah, usually what we're going to see with our models is that it will be capitalized. The first letter will be capitalized, and we'll make it singular. Okay, so we have a user class that we're creating. Now I'm actually going to inherit from a different class here. Remember that? If we're creating a class and we pass something into these parentheses, that means that this class that we're creating is going to inherit from some other class. The one that I'm going to inherit from is models.model. Okay? So we imported models here, and then we're inheriting specifically from this model class. Now inside this class, what I'm going to do is I'm going to create the different fields that I want my user to have. Okay? So if I want my user to have a first name, I'm going to create that field right here. I'll say first name equals. And we want to give this a certain field type. So what type of field is this?
Char.
We're going to say this is going to be a models.char field. So that just means a character field. Okay? And if when we invoke this function, so we're not really invoking a function. Obviously, we're creating a new instance of this char field class. You can kind of see that here. We can also pass in some arguments if we want to limit the length of that field. So if I want to say max length 255, so I don't want anybody to have a first name longer than 255, for instance, right? Okay. So let's say I also want to have a last name. Well, I can create that here. The shortcut for that, if you just want to duplicate something down on a Mac, is you're going to hold down your Option key, Shift, and then the down arrow will duplicate the thing downward, or if you do up arrow, it will duplicate it upward. All right. So let's change that to last name. Okay. Next, I'm going to create an email field because I want my users to be able to have an email address. So we'll say email equals models.email field. So I could potentially put some kind of cap on the length of that if I wanted to as well. I could say I don't want emails that are longer than 255 characters. Okay. All right. And pretty much those are the main things that I want to keep track of with my user for now. I just want a first name, a last name, and an email. But I also want to keep track of when this user was created and when this user was last updated. Now I've created a little user snippet for Python files for myself, and I'm going to type that in here. So timestamps is what I've called this user snippet. Anybody who wants some help with user snippets, I'll be happy to help you with that. So if I tab out, it'll give me this. Okay, and let me close this so you guys can see it a little bit better. So I'm getting this field called created at, which I want, and then you can see that's going to be a date time field. And inside there, I'm saying auto now add equals true. That means whenever I add a new user, I'm going to put that this created at to be the current date time. So whenever this action took place, right?
What's the delimiter for in the parenthesis? You can define multiple attributes of that property.
So keep in mind that you can see what this is doing is it's creating a new instance of the datetime field class, right? Which means that it's going to run that init function. And then we're just passing some optional arguments in there.
Yeah, no, you're right. Yeah.
Okay. Cool. So down here, if we say auto now equals true, that means every time we touch a record in here, we're gonna change its updated at to be whatever the current date time is. All right. Now notice here, this is kind of interesting. Did we create like an init method in here or anything like that? No, right? But we are extending from this, okay? So these look like they're class variables. It's not really something that we've seen before. But I don't want you guys to get too hung up on this and worry about it too much. Basically, this is what we're going to need to do if we want to create a new model. Okay? This is our user model. All right. Any questions about this part before we move on a little bit? No? All right. Very good. So now that I've created this model, one thing that we're going to need to do, as we had to do when we were working with Session, is that we had to migrate our database, right? However, this time, since I haven't yet created a migration file for this, I need to do that first. So it's kind of a two-step process. Whenever we're making changes to our models.py file, we have to make our migrations, and then we actually need to migrate those changes. So let's go into the terminal and get that started. So I've got my environment activated, so that's great. So what I want to do is I want to say Python manage.py make migrations. Okay? Now notice here that it says it's actually created this file. So inside my main folder, inside the migrations folder, there's this new file 0001_initial.py. So let's go take a quick peek at that. So inside my main, I've got this migrations folder, and then right here is the file that was just created for me. Let me close out some of this stuff here. Okay, so we created this migration file, and if you look closely at this migration file, it's creating our models for us. And it's saying the name of this model is going to be user. It has the different fields that we specified in our models.py. Yeah, so you can see all the fields. We've got our first name, last name, email, created at, and updated at, and that's it. Okay. Now that that migrations file has been created for us, I can actually migrate my database, which is going to be, basically at this point, it's just going to create a table for users for me. Because right now my database doesn't yet have a users table. All right, so let me close that real quick. We'll go back inside of our terminal, and I'm going to say Python manage.py, and this time I'm going to say migrate. Okay? And you could see that it was applying all the different migrations that we had. Here's the one that was just created, right? It said main.0001_initial. So it just applied that migration, which means that it prepared our database to receive some data. Now right now our table is completely empty. We have this new user table that was created. There's nothing in it, right? I haven't done anything with it. Okay. So let's create some users, right? Let me clear out of here. We have this thing in Django called the Python shell, which allows us to actually interact with our database through a shell. And I could say Python manage.py shell. Okay. So the way that we're going to interact with our user objects is that we need to import this class that we just built. So up at the top, I'm going to say from main, which is my main app folder, .models, I'm going to import user. Okay? Now that we have this variable called user, we can use it to create some users. So I'm going to say user.objects.create. Okay, so this is what I'm going to do every time I want to create a user. I'm going to say user.objects.create. Now let's say I want to create Stefan. All right, so I'm going to pass in his information. I'm going to say first name, equals Stefan. Okay. Last name, Belisario. Okay. Email, s@b.com. Okay. And then it's telling us right here, we have this user object here. It was returned when we created him. All right. Let's say I want to create another one. So let me just change this to Jessica. Castellanos. Okay. Castellanos. j@c.com. Cool. That returned us another user object. And you can see it has the number 2, so that should be the ID of our second user. All right, cool. So that's the create part. Now, what if I want to just see my users, right? I just want to see who's in my database right now. Well, we have kind of a way that we can do that. We can say user.objects.all. Okay. Whoa, that gave me a query set. So, I mean, it is telling me that I have 2 users and they're in this query set here, but I don't really see anything about them. So that's not super helpful, right? What if I say user.objects.all, and this time I say .values? That won't give me anything either. All right, let's try to iterate through our users. How about that? All right, let's just do a for loop. So you guys remember how we can loop through something? Yeah. So let's do something like this. For user in, no, it's going to be for user in user.object. Oh, you were saying, okay, I gotcha. .all. Okay, so this user.objects.all is going to give us, again, all of the users that are in our database, right? Now I'm going to return here. I'm going to tab out, and I'm just going to print user.firstname, user.lastname, and then user.email. Okay. Okay, so there we go. We're seeing that we have these 2 users. We iterated through them. I should be able to just kind of look at these all in one shot. Let me try this one more time. Is it .values with the... Oh, never mind. All right, I'll figure that out later. But you should be able to see it in a very simple way, but it's just going to be a big blob of text. It's not going to be super helpful anyway. Yes, Juan.
For the print user first name, user last name one,
yeah.
What if you want to print out also the ID for each user?
Yeah, we could do that as well. So let me go back up here. Let's do that one more time.
Because I remember when we modeled the class, we did not set any ID attribute for the class. So I'm assuming that the system will automatically.
It's auto generating those guys, right? So we have our 1 or 2.
And the default key is called user.id.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's a good point. So we can access each user's ID by just accessing the ID attribute. Cool. All right. Very good. What if I wanted to see, say, only users who had a specific last name? So I only want to see users who have a last name of Castellanos, something like that, right? So I'll create a new variable. I'll just say Castellanos equals user.objects.filter. Okay, so filter means I want to match some specific condition inside here. I can say, yes?
What if instead of .filter you put .get? Would that work?
We'll get to that in a second.
Okay.
Yeah. That's a good question, though. Okay. And now let's just print out Castellanos. Okay, you can see that we have a query set that had one object inside of it. So if I wanted to, I should be able to print out the very first object that's inside there. If I did add an index of 0. Okay, and that's giving me actually Jessica's object. If I want to see her first name, I could do this. Okay. So what filter is doing is it's giving us back a query set, which is basically like a list. Okay. So when we filter, we're potentially getting one or more objects, not just one. Now what you were asking about was get. If I just want to get a specific object, I'm not worried about getting multiples, I could use a different method. So let's say I'm going to say Jessica equals user.objects.get. And here I can say I want the first name to be Jessica. Okay. Now if I print Jessica, and I can actually, let me see if this works too. Whew. Okay, so if we print Jessica and then we say dot double under dict double under, that means that I basically want to print out Jessica as if she were a dictionary. She's an object, but I'm kind of like, for the sake of this, I'm just sort of temporarily turning her into a dictionary. Still not that user-friendly though, right? Because you can see how all the text is just kind of like running all together, right? It's kind of hard to look at. So what I wanted to introduce you guys to is an extension for VS Code that you can install. It's called SQLite. And what that will enable you to do is it'll enable you to actually look at your database right here from within VS Code in a way that looks nice and friendly, like you're looking at a database table. Okay? So, yeah.
So for the user objects, objects wasn't something you had to import in your user class because it's a class that you instantiated automatically.
Because we're inheriting from the models.model class, objects is available to us.
Okay.
Yep.
Okay.
Very good point. All right, so here in the extensions, if you guys look for SQLite, so it's just SQLite, you'll see the very first extension here. I've got it installed right now. You can install it in your VS Code, and then I'll kind of show you guys how to use that a little bit.
You just install it through like quick install, or
No. You're going to install it by clicking on this little thing here to pull up the extensions, and then do a search for it. And then you can just click on the install button for that particular extension. It's not available for me because I already have it installed, but you'll see there will be a little install button when you search for it.
So that's when you want to do SQLite.
SQLite, right. All right, so once we've got that installed, I can access it by holding down Command-Shift-P. For Windows users, that should be Control-Shift-P. You'll open up this window at the top, and you can search for SQLite. And then the command that we want to do is we want to open a database, right? Which is, I want to open the database of this project that we're in right now. So I'll click on that. And then it's going to ask us, what database are we trying to open? By default, it's going to pull up db.sqlite3. That's the one for this specific project, so I'm going to go with that. Okay, once I've clicked on that, you'll notice that down here I've got this little SQLite Explorer, and this is what will allow me to look at my database. So let's go like this. Now, I've clicked the arrow to open up my database, and you can see I've got all these tables in there. And the reason all those tables are in there is because Django creates a bunch of stuff by default. Okay? Out of the box, it's going to create some extra tables that you guys aren't even going to use. But one table that might end up getting used in your project is that session table, right? Okay. All right, so if I go all the way down, you'll see I've got this table called main_user, and that was the one that I created when I migrated over this user model. So let me just click this side arrow over here. and I can open up this table and you can see all the different users that I have in there. So that's kind of nice. So if I go back to my shell here and I want to create another one, go back here. Trying to get back to it. Okay, so let's say I want to create another one. This time I'm going to create Nick. I'm going to try to get your last name right. Don't help me until I ask for it. Is it Ariag? Okay, now I need help.
Yeah, I just forgot ADA.
Ariagata. Okay. All right, cool. n@a.com. I'm sure he wants to be associated with her, right? All right. Okay. All right. Cool. So we're not seeing this yet in our database, right? But if I want to update it, I can click on the little triangle to just update that table. So there we go. Now we're seeing Nick in there as well. Okay. So this provides us kind of a much friendlier interface in which to take a look at our database. There is another thing that you guys could potentially install. It's called DB Browser for SQLite, and I have it linked in the schedule sheet. So that's more like a standalone application that you can use on your computer for interacting with SQLite.
Can I get time for the created at is 18:45?
Mm-hmm. Oh, why is it 18? Oh, it's because we didn't change the time zone.
Oh.
Yeah, remember we kind of had that issue when we were working on the session assignment? Same thing.
What is the default mainstream time? Well,
I believe it's UTC, so universal time.
So right there, TZ input UTC, right? Or is that?
Yeah, time zone.
Oh yeah, it's showing it down here, right? Yep, UTC. Correct. Yep. Yeah, exactly. Okay, cool. So that's the actual creation part. What if I want to update a record, right? So I'll say I want to change Jessica for some reason. First, I'm going to want to get Jessica, but I already have her in a variable, so that's kind of handy. What if I want to change her I want to say jessica.email equals jessica@castellanos.com. Okay, and then I come down here and I try to look at my table again. Wait, nothing has changed yet.
You need to update it.
So I actually have to save the record once I've changed some attributes of it. Okay, and this is going to be a very important thing. Sometimes you guys will forget that it has to be saved on update. Okay, so if I just say jessica.save, then that should do it for me. And if I refresh this here, there we go. Her email has changed now. Right?
So
Yes.
you don't need to make migration since you changed.
No, so make migrations is only if we're actually changing the model that,
Oh,
that
okay.
is interacting with our
Not the-
database, not a single record.
Got it.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, exactly. All right. So I've saved Jessica. She's changed. That's good. So we've kind of done two parts of it, right? We've worked on creating records. We've worked on reading records, which is essentially I can get a record by some particular, attribute. I can say, what if I want to say my first user? So I'll just create a variable here, first user equals user.objects.get, where the ID equals 1. Okay. Now I can print out first user as a dictionary. Okay, so that makes sense because the first user that I entered in was Stefan, right? And Stefan has an ID of 1. We also have another handy method that we can use to get the first person, and it looks like this. I'm just going to reassign this variable. So first person equals user.objects.first. Okay, and that'll essentially do the same thing, only this time it'll find the very first user in the database regardless of what that person's ID is. Because what if I've deleted the first person? That first person, or, the person with an ID of 1 might not even be in there anymore. All right, so I'll do the same thing. I'll just print out firstperson.dict, and notice that we're still looking at Stephen. Okay, cool. So I'm going to delete Stephen because I've decided he no longer deserves to be in my database. I'm get out of here. All right, so let's just create a variable for him. So we'll say Stefan equals user.objects.first. Okay. Stefan.delete. Okay. All right, so let me refresh the database down here.
I'm Chris.
Yeah. And you guys can see he's been removed. So that's it for Stefan. He's done. All right.
So within this is the changes that have to be updated and committed at the column level, but because the delete is a row level transaction, you just automatically.
Yeah, so when we invoke the delete method, it's just happening for us. We don't have to do save after that. It's automatically going to delete that whole entire record.
And so it's the same thing with the insert, because it's a row level, and you don't have to save after that.
Correct. Yeah, we don't have to manually save it after we've created a brand new one. Yeah. Yeah. Does anybody know what that query would look like in MySQL if we were deleting somebody like that?
Delete from somewhere.
Exactly. So I'm just going to kind of comment this out. We would say something like delete from, and our table name in this project is called main user, and we would say where ID equals 1. For instance, if we knew that that person had an ID of 1. Okay. Also, I wanted to touch on too, how would we, if we were doing just straight a raw MySQL query, how would we insert a record? Try to make this a little bigger. Does anybody know what that query would look like?
I'm trying to remember the full syntax. So insert into
Okay, good.
table name.
Okay. So the table name is main user.
And then
Okay.
in parentheses, you just put that list of values.
So the first set of parentheses would be what are the field names that we want to do. So if we wanted to insert first name, last name, email, and then after that we would specify our values, right? So we would say something like Stefan Belisario and then s@b.com. Okay. So that's basically what our MySQL query would look like if we had to do this stuff using MySQL. Okay.
So what is the line before one main that user equal to 1? Yeah.
What's this line right here?
No, this line, yeah.
Ah, okay. So what it's saying is that it matched one user and then it deleted that user. It's just basically a confirmation. We have deleted that specific object from the database. Okay. So that's how we would insert into the database. How would we update a record using MySQL? Does anyone remember this?
Just be like update the table.
So update main user. So we would say something like set first name, or let's say we were changing Jessica's email, kind of like how we did before. So we'll say set email equal to Jessica, @castellanos.com. And then we would have our where clause, right? So we would say where first, or I'll say where last name equals Castellanos. Okay, so that would be the query to update her email, kind of the way that we did. What if I just wanted to find a specific user? How would I do that using MySQL? Okay, so select star means we're selecting all the columns, right? From main underscore user. And then if I was looking for a particular user, again, I could put in this where clause. I could say where last name equals Castellanos. Okay. So you can see that the Django ORM is giving us kind of a nicer way of handling this stuff. It's doing the work for us under the hood. So it's creating sort of an abstraction, if that makes sense. No. I'm not actually doing anything. I just put comments in front of these. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, because we're not really dealing with raw SQL when we're doing Django. I just wanted to kind of talk to you guys about this is how we would do it if we were interacting directly with the database, not going through Django, right?
Is it built with Django to be able to create your model, but you're importing anything else, you're not creating it, and then you're not going through Django, then creating your database. Rather, or you create your model first, and then you create your files there versus just
versus creating the migrations and then migrating.
Yeah, versus just connecting to the database itself and then building the model inside Django by using some input from the database, whether if it's like a DBL file or something like that.
I don't know. That's a good question. I'll see if I can find some info on that for you. I've never tried to do it, so I don't know. Okay. So that's really the whole thing is we've got this create, read, update, and delete, right? Those are the main actions that we're going to be doing with the database. One other thing I'll show you guys too is what if I just wanted to get the last user in my list? Well, I can do the same sort of thing. I can say, I'm just going to say print user.objects .last, and then again I'll do this double under dict so that I print it out as a dictionary. And you see that the last user that I have in my main user table is Nick, right? Now I'm going to exit out of the shell real quick. Oops. Okay, so again, just a quick review. To get into the shell, we're going to do Python manage.py shell. Okay, now watch this. User.objects.all. Oh man, what happens? There's a reason why I went out and came back in, because some of you guys are going to run into this problem too. Yeah, I need to import every single time I re-instantiate this shell. All right. So again, I'm going to have to say from main.models import user. Okay. Now I can do what I was trying to do before, user.objects.all, and it's giving me that entire query set, right, which has 2 user objects in it.
You just call it.
In this case.
So the 3 number, that's just showing me the ID, right? So this one has an ID of 2, this one has an ID of 3. You were the ID of 1, but you got removed, right? So you're not in there anymore.
Question mark. Models doesn't need to be. Oh, never mind. I thought it had to be.
Oh, it doesn't get updated like the ID keys.
No, the IDs do not change. So if I had an ID of 1 that I removed out, the next one would still be 2 and 3.
But can you make like another database that that take the number 1 key? Let's say you want to add 1 more, and then let's say get the number 1 key, like the ID. Or it
Oh, I
goes-
think I understand what you're saying. So the next time I insert a user, can I make it so that that user is going to have an ID of 1?
Yeah.
No. It's auto-incrementing, so it's still going to be an ID of 4. It'll still be the next one.
So
down-
once you
down the line.
remove that thing, it's done.
Yeah. Because you wouldn't want to change all their IDs, because those IDs may be connected to other tables, right? So think of it that way. Once a user's been created, that user's going to have the same ID for the life of the application. It's not going to change, because that's their unique identifier. That's the only thing in our user table that we can ensure is unique for each user. 2 users could potentially have the same first name, right, or same last name, whatever, but they won't have the same ID.
So even if you delete that user and then add that user back in, it'll.
Yeah, now that user would have a totally different ID. So if I said user.objects.create and I created Steven again, so first name Stefan, last name equals Sario, okay, email s@b.com. Okay, and then if we go back to our SQLite down here, why am I not seeing that? Hold on a second. Okay, so main user, let me open up that table again, and you can see that Steven now has an ID of 4, right? All right. Any questions about any of the steps here, sort of creating, reading, updating, and deleting? Those are the 4 main things you guys are going to be doing.
I missed the part before you migrated the table. You typed something else into the.
Right. That was make migrations. Yeah, so if I exit out of here, the command was, and I'll just run it again because it's not going to hurt anything. So I'm just going to say Python manage.py make migrations. And here you'll see it just says no changes detected because I haven't changed my models.py file. Yeah, still the same. Cool, let's have thumbs on this. All right. Any specific questions before we dismiss?
So what's the number next to the ID? The first one.
So this one right here is just telling us what's the number of this user in our database right now. The ID is never going to change. We'll think of that as like immutable. But these numbers can change. That's just something that SQLite is showing us.
Okay, so
That's not actually in the database.
So
It's just
like a indicator, like the line, the row from Excel, right? So it's just an indicator.
yeah, it's just like an indicator. Hey, this is the first user that I have. But that's not the user's ID. This is the ID over here.
So by default, the user ID it will create it for you if you don't set it. But is that possible? You can set like a specific format of the user ID. For example, instead of just increment 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Is that possible? You can do like maybe 0, 0, 0, 1, 0 and increment to 0, 0, 0, 1, 1, something like that.
Why would you want to?
And
I mean, doesn't that seem like you're putting more into that ID column than you need to? I mean, just an integer like this works perfectly fine. I can't see any reason why you need to do that or want to.
So maybe because I was thinking like you have for example an account, you will have an account number that will also be a unique identifier.
Yeah, but that would just be a different field in your
A
table.
different field.
Yeah.
Okay, I see.
Okay. All right, guys. I'm gonna let you out so you can get to work. Grab me if you need any help with anything.